it was a cultural shock for me because like out here in Delhi, like I've gone out for dinner at 10. Like
Perfect. Yeah.
that's that's what we do. Like not all the time, but like it's a pretty normal thing. Yeah.
Yeah. You're not going to get that in Adelaide. Everything is closed by 10 o'clock. How good is this?
Yeah, it's awesome.
So, g'day everybody. I'm Rob Malicki from Choosing a Uni, and this is a bit of an experiment because I'm with Mohnish Kalra, who's from Delhi,
Yeah.
and Mohnish reached out to me and said, "Hey, like I'd be really interested to have a conversation with you about, choosing my university in Australia." And so we just sort of said, "Well, why don't we just see what happens and record it, and go from there." So, Mohnish, thanks for joining me on the show, man.
Thank you so much, Rob, for this opportunity. It's really great to finally get on a call with you. It's really nice to see you. I was actually watching your videos and somehow I thought that, okay, this guy, he is onto something and maybe he would have the answers that I'm, looking for.
Let's just start by, you telling me a little bit about what you're hoping to do and what you're hoping for from the experience.
My introduction would begin with my qualification, which is that I'm a computer science engineer. And as we all know that India is full of them. So my parents thought that this could be a very valuable career for me. Back when I was young and didn't know that what exactly it is that I want to do. I want to be in a field where I can understand why people do certain things. Of course, as a project manager, as I was talking to you about degree in MCom, a Masters of Commerce from University of Sydney, for example. So they'll teach me about how to understand the needs of the users and
Mm.
how to communicate them to the stakeholders and actually build products that can serve their needs.
Okay, let's jump into some questions. What's the end goal for you, Manish? Are you keen to try and stay in Australia afterwards, or are you pretty keen to go back to India, or you just want to see what happens?
I just want to see what happens, to be honest, because
Mhm.
there, as I said, there are pros and cons of every decision that I make. And if I'm going to stay away from my family, then there should be a legitimate reason for that, right?
Yeah.
And given the startup culture and the boom that they have out here in India, if I come back with a relevant work experience and I have a certain amount of credibility in the job market as well as a certain level of financial security, then I can always, because I think I'm a an individual who looks at problems differently from the world. People are like running away from them, and I'm like, why? Like I just see it and I just see it.
If you were to come and study in Australia, what would be the most important things for you?
First of all, the education,
Yep.
the kind of education that they're providing, the projects that I'm going to work on, and the overall quality of the batch as well as the faculty. I think that's the most important thing.
Good, good.
Yeah,
Okay, so a good quality education, preferably
yeah,
where there's good employment outcomes, and
yeah,
I suppose like internship opportunities, things like that would be
yeah.
important. Okay, great.
Right.
What else?
Good network of people. If an institution has good quality alumni, then I think it's really a benefit for you in all these different, contexts or opportunities that they can provide you with and all of that. I think that's very important.
Any other things that are really important considerations for you, like non-negotiables?
If I can actually have a decent work-life balance, so like if I'm working part-time, then I'll be able to manage my time. I should be able to devote my time to studies as well as I should be able to hit the gym or play a sport that I like or something like that. I shouldn't be burned out at the end of it because I've heard that some universities are like that and it's really difficult to manage as a student because you're always living from one paycheck to another and it gets really hectic out there in a because you're in a different country, right? I think out there in Australia and most of these countries, degrees do not matter as such as long as you are willing to work into a certain field and you have the relevant skills for the job, they'll take you. It could be a pathway for international students like us, but for people that are native to those countries, they value skills over degrees. They don't care about which college you're coming from to a certain extent. So initially, when I was researching, while when I texted you, it was back in November. So I wasn't aware of all these things. And I just thought that, okay, University of Sydney, oh, the QS ranking, it's amazing. I
Mm.
found this course, it's amazing. I'll go there. And so many people from University of Sydney, that, oh, I want to come there, I want to study in the July intake. I was really happy about it. I thought I struck good. I was like, oh, this is the place that I want to be, and this is amazing, and wow, it's Sydney after all. As I got to know more about it, I realized that it couldn't be a diamond, it could be glass as well. You have to consider all these different things. I'm so sorry, I cannot, I forgot the phrase, but I think you got the idea of it.
I understand exactly what you're saying.
Yeah,
And look, you're exactly
yeah,
right. It is culturally, it is very different here. Most employers these days would prefer to have a graduate that has good soft skills, so
yeah,
good empathy, good ability to work in a team, these sorts of skills, rather than the fact that they went to the University of Sydney. That's mostly irrelevant, I would say. Overall, the level of university in Australia is very high. 86% of Australian universities rank in the top 1,000 universities in the world.
yeah,
If you go to the UK, that's 45%. And if you go to America, it's 20%. So, in fact, the system, and we have very few universities, so it makes sense. There's
yeah,
very few universities, but they typically, the quality of education is very good. And the reason for that is because the government has, Australia has very strict quality legislation, rules in place to make sure that the education system is quite high quality. And that shows in the overall ranking of the Australian higher education system. It's a fine balancing act between, obviously there's the group of 8 universities,
yeah,
the ones that have really, they're research intensive, so they
yeah,
rank the highest. But one of the reasons they rank the highest is because a lot of those international rankings put a very big weight on research output and quality research output. If you actually go to QS websites or some of
yeah.
the other websites, you can look up how they work out their ranking. And research is really important. So then the question is, well, is research important to you? There's the group of 8, so your top 8 universities in Australia that have the highest reputation. But
Yeah.
underneath that, there's a whole group of universities that internationally still rank very well, but
Yeah.
then, maybe their reputation isn't as strong on paper, but they are just excellent institutions.
One name comes to mind. Should I tell you about the university that I'm thinking about?
Go for it, yeah.
I guess RMIT is the
hmm
one that you're talking about because it has an excellent reputation for design.
hmm
And I think it's not in the group of 8 universities, if I'm not
It's
wrong,
not, no.
but it has excellent internship programs. And I was actually talking to people on EDP list. There was this guy who was a cybersecurity expert, and he taught at RMIT, and he was also working towards his own startup.
RMIT is one of those universities. UTS in Sydney,
Yeah, yeah,
QUT up in Queensland. I would put in that box
yeah,
as well.
QUT.
There's more, but
Yeah,
you're having a sense of these institutions because you said you'd prepared some specific questions. Why don't we jump to
yeah.
those?
Let's talk about money for a bit.
Yes. hmm
Okay, what's the average cost of living for a student if he's in Sydney, for example? And will he be able to earn while he's studying full time? And how easy is it to get a part-time job? Like, it's a layered question. It goes on
Okay.
and on.
Okay,
Yeah,
so firstly, let's talk about cost of living. In Sydney is the most expensive city.
yeah,
Right now, accommodation is difficult. There's a shortage of good rentals all across the city. So it's challenging right now, and rent has gone up quite a lot. One of the positive sides, I suppose, is that Australian universities have been investing a lot in student housing. So if you can get a place into student housing, particularly, in the first 6 months or a year, I would recommend that these days. In fact, if you financially can afford it, I think that
yeah,
removes a lot of stress because the rental market really is hard right now. International students are limited in the number of hours that they can work in
yeah,
Australia. And so once again, that kind of feeds into the question about, well, how much money do you need to earn in order to survive or enjoy life? Because some people come to Australia with with just the minimum amount of savings, and they have to work a lot. And that's really hard. There is plenty of work available. If you want to drive an Uber, no problem.
yeah,
If you want to
yeah,
work in a shop,
yeah,
no problem. So like these little jobs, if you like casual work, there is quite a lot. It can be hard to find really good, meaningful,
mm,
substantial part-time work while you're working as a student. So one of the things that I really encourage people to do is to try to find a job on campus. The jobs that are on campus in Australia, the pay is
Yeah.
generally very good, and
Okay.
you know it's right where you're studying, so it's easier to find access, you know, to access the work. It's more convenient, pays
Yeah.
well. So those things that I think are important. Sydney is the most expensive city, so that means
Mm.
accommodation is the most expensive, food is the most expensive, transport's expensive. Like if you haven't got the financial means to do it, don't come to Sydney.
Mm.
And I'll give it to you in one statistic. In Sydney, like the average cost of rent is something like $600 for an apartment for a week. In Melbourne, it's like
Wow.
480. That one number alone is like 5 hours of casual work every week. You know, over a course of a year, that's 250 hours that you're, as you said, like enjoying life, going to the gym, playing sport. So for those people that really that's the deal breaker, I'm cautious about Sydney right now. There are great cities outside of the major capitals. I love Brisbane for students. I think it's amazing. And Perth as well on the west coast. It's
Yeah.
very far from the east coast. It's
Yeah.
like on paper, it looks really isolated. It is a fantastic city for students. But once you get used to it, it's clean, people are friendly, the cost of living is much lower. So for some people, I just think Perth is the right option because it's so much cheaper. Yeah, that depends on your personal circumstances, really.
Yeah. Yeah. But what
Uh,
about Brisbane? You mentioned Brisbane. What
Yeah,
about it?
it's a really well balanced city. The cost of living is much cheaper than Sydney and Melbourne. The weather is good, like good. It can get hot in the summertime and quite humid. It has a really relaxed feel to it, much more relaxed than Sydney and Melbourne. Can get pretty quiet. On the weekends, things are closed in the city. Brisbane isn't like that.
Yeah.
Brisbane is open a lot of the time. So I just find it's this beautiful balance between being less busy and expensive than Sydney and Melbourne, more busy than Perth. The weather
But
is great, people are relaxed, and it has great universities. You know, UQ is an incredible university. QUT is excellent. Griffith is excellent. So it has these sort of three universities that really are good quality. So
yeah.
I just find it sits right in that sweet spot for me. If I were going to go back and had to choose any city in Australia, it would probably be Brisbane at this point. And then the other thing
Right.
is, I think for Brisbane is it's good to travel. Like if you want to do some travel while you're here, going up the coast, there's great beaches going up the coast, going down the coast into New South Wales. There's plenty of like good beaches and outdoors.
Another thing was, what is that one particular course, or what do you think is the requirement in the country? Like, what kind of people do they need? What kind of jobs do they want people to take up? What's
Yep.
the overall scenario?
A good question. The most popular degree for international students that I'm aware of are those commerce degrees. So if you
Okay.
go to something like the University of Sydney, the
Yeah.
University of Sydney, I think, is about 45% international students.
Okay.
It has a huge international student population, and a lot of those international students are in the business discipline. But for some people, that's great because you get to meet people from all over the world. Other people, they're
Yeah.
just like, I want to meet Australians. You know, I want to meet local
Yeah.
students, and that's not going to be for them. Since I've sort of opened that can of worms, you know, there's different sizes of universities in Australia too. The
Okay.
University of Sydney is a huge university. You're going to have a different experience at the University of Sydney than you will at the University of Newcastle, north of Sydney, you know, which is a much smaller campus. So
Okay.
if, for example, meeting and being part of a local community is really critical for you, then those big inner city universities aren't necessarily the best. For those sorts of people, going to a regional institution is sometimes a good thing, or to a smaller city where you have a more intimate experience. Have you seen the Compared website? Let me quickly show you this because this is just such a great resource. Compared is based on Australian government data. So the
Yeah.
Australian government goes out and surveys students who've completed their degrees. They survey employers and they collect all of that data in order to create this website to help people choose their institution. Let's just add some universities in here. So I can add like QUT. Actually, you can compare three, right? Let's go QUT. You can add that. So I'm now comparing this. let's add like RMIT University. We're going to add that. And let's just for fun say UTS. Right? So we have 3 different universities in 3 different cities.
Okay.
All right, now I can hit compare. In here, we can look at the different data. Compare now. That should just compare them.
Yeah.
Okay, here we go. Current student experience, recent graduate satisfaction, and recent graduate employment. Okay. So
Yeah.
as you look at these different institutions, it tells you about things like, are students happy? You know, did they have an overall positive experience? So this
Yeah.
is telling you like QUT, RMIT, UTS. And underneath it shows you the national average. So it tells you whether or not a university is above or below the national average. Interestingly, so when we talk about reputation, you know, the University of Melbourne is the #1 ranked university in Australia on all
Yeah.
of the global schemes. But when you look at student satisfaction, it basically ranks last in Australia. Of course, you don't hear that, right? But, you know, it's a big institution, and it
Yeah.
has focuses on research, which is typically a postgraduate area or an academic discipline. So
Yeah.
do people who are studying an undergraduate in a huge course, are they getting dedicated attention of their academics? No. Like those academics are teaching huge classes. So students are less happy. So this is really useful for you to look at things, you know, skills development, you know, teaching, people happy with the teaching.
Yeah.
And what you can do is you can actually add disciplines here. You can actually jump down into the detail of
Yeah.
the individual disciplines. So here I'm
Yeah.
looking at, what am I looking at? QUT. Let's find their IT side of things, computer information systems. So you can add that to compare. I can actually go in there and look at the statistics just for computer and information systems at QUT. This
Yeah.
is really, really useful for you to really get into the detail of, you know, that main question you're asking, Mohnish, which was around the quality of the education. And you can look at things like graduate salaries, that's employment, and then salaries, like how much people are getting paid.
Yeah.
It's really interesting, right? What else would you like? What else can we talk about?
Let's talk about the University of Sydney.
Yep.
Then let's talk about UNSW. It's maybe the University of Adelaide and Queensland, because you were talking about Brisbane. So I'll look it up for sure. Let's talk
Okay,
about
cool.
these.
Let's talk about those. Let's start with USyd and UNSW.
Yeah.
Those are both 2 big universities, and the campus life is really active. Both of those universities have, I don't even know how many clubs, 100 clubs, student clubs.
If you could tell me about cricket as well, like how big of a thing is still, because I'm an avid fan and I love to play that sport when I'm out.
Both UNSW and Sydney have cricket clubs. My
Yeah.
dad played cricket for the University of Sydney.
Oh,
So,
wow.
yeah, I like the University of Sydney for cricket.
That's nice.
But
Great
the
to
thing
know.
with the cricket as well is that there's not only the university clubs, but in Sydney, in Brisbane, in Melbourne, they have the local competitions that you can join. So they have
Okay.
clubs all over the city that you can go join. So you don't have to play for the university. You can go and play for a local club. And to be honest, I think that's a great way to get to meet local
Yeah.
Australians, is to join one of the local cricket clubs, the one that's close
Yeah.
to your accommodation. So campuses, University of Sydney and the University of New South Wales, amazing
Yeah.
campuses. You know, they have plenty of places for you to eat, great libraries. They're huge, so they have beautiful grass areas and trees and great architecture, good facilities, really good facilities in those institutions, whether it's a gym or science labs, those sorts of things are really great. In terms of accessibility, the University of Sydney is really close to the centre of Sydney, maybe 1 kilometre walk or 2 kilometre walk from Central Station. Comfortable, you know, like you can walk it in 25 minutes from part of campus to walk into the city centre. So that's nice if you want to be right in the heart of Sydney. Uni of New South Wales is a little bit further out. There is a tram that takes you all the way down into the city centre, but it's much closer to the beach. So Adelaide, I'm in Adelaide right now, funnily enough. The Uni of Adelaide campus is much smaller than Sydney and New South Wales, but
Yeah.
it's really nice. I like it. It's much quieter. Adelaide is a pretty quiet city. It's 9 p.m. right now. If I went down there into the city centre, most stuff is probably going to be closed. There might be one where you've got some food places open,
Yeah.
things like that, but it's quiet here.
Is it
And
the same for Sydney?
no, Sydney is a lot more active, particularly like not far from the University of Sydney. There are some very lively areas. New South Wales is a little bit further out. Is quite active, but also not that far from the centre of the city. So you can always find something. The university is similar, like in the middle of the day, lots of students around. It is a very pretty campus. It's close to the river. It's a really nice place that's more relaxed, I would say, than the big universities. But it gets very quiet very fast. If you're there at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, there's not many people left. I really like Adelaide because it's clean and it's quieter and it's cheap. So then Queensland, the two main ones sort of close to the city are UQ, the main campus of UQ. I love the UQ campus. It's a
Mm.
gorgeous campus. It's a big outdoor campus, great architecture. Because the weather there's so much sunshine, students are always outside. So there's always people out on the grass, relaxing and talking. It has excellent clubs and facilities, great sports facilities as well, and
Oh,
you can
wow.
get right into the middle of city by taking the ferry. There's quite a lot
Okay.
of student accommodation close to the university,
Yeah.
within walking distance, so that's a good option. But once again, just that light, Manish, you talked about lifestyle. Like
Yeah.
Brisbane to me is more of a lifestyle city, but a university like UQ, if you want that prestige element, you're
Yeah.
still going to get like the prestige element of a very well-ranked group of 8 university, but with
Yeah.
more of the lifestyle elements that you're probably looking for.
Don't you think for a person who is more career oriented,
hmm
wouldn't they choose a big city like Melbourne or Sydney for the kind of opportunities they'll have? Or do you think that it's beneficial for a person to, as you were talking about the lifestyle, so one can like get their degree from UQ and then move out to a bigger city? Is that feasible,
Well,
possible,
there's,
or
there's there's still plenty of opportunities in Brisbane. It's not to
okay?
say that because it's a smaller city, there's not as many opportunities, and that's where somewhere like a university like QUT, which really says that one of the main things it wants to be known for is its industry connections. QUT is like in the middle of Brisbane. It
Okay.
has a same thing. It's a lovely campus. It's called Gardens Point. It's on the river. Gorgeous campus, and they really pride themselves on practical programs, industry connections, work integrated learning. Very good IT faculty there. Strong UX program. I was looking at their Master of IT program, but it's a fantastic institution. And if you're looking for that professional edge, being at that
Yeah.
sort of institution has an advantage where they really pride themselves on their industry connections. To
Yeah.
me, there's an advantage in not going to a huge university like Sydney, where suddenly there are 2,000 people in the IT program all looking for internships,
Yeah.
but being at
Yeah.
a university that's a little bit smaller, that really prides itself on doing that well, there's some advantage to that, I think.
I understood your point. I got your point. Actually, I was talking to a friend of mine, and I'm not sure if this is the right way to convey the message, but what we were talking about was that all of our classmates, all of the people that I know, they're trying to move out to either the US or UK. They're
Mhm.
already going to markets that are saturated, and the competition is slightly higher because everyone wants to be there. But on the other hand, here is this country which actually accepts immigrants. It's open to them, provides good quality education. If I compare it to, for example, UK, they are
Mhm.
increasing the prices of their visas and their programs and all of that, and they offer only 1 year, single year programs for their
Yeah.
master's degree. Whereas Australia is giving us that opportunity to like stay back for 3 years and like learn for 2 years. So he was asking me like, why do you want to fight in a place which is full of competition, and like why do you have to battle everything? Like if you want to battle, you can always stay here in Delhi, right? There's It's a battle out there as well. So like if you're just jumping from one city to another, and it's going to be the same for you. And if you
Mhm.
think that if you actually want to stick to your word, if you want to give time to your passion, your gym, your reading, your writing, your cricket, and all these different things, along with your studies, and build a decent life for yourself. Like, why are you following someone else's footsteps? If I'm not able to build the life that I desire, what's the point of it? And I can always sit back and stay here where I am in the comfort of my family home. Yeah.
Yeah. I think you're exactly right. You're exactly right.
Yeah. What you said about Brisbane really makes sense to me because, like, it's nice to be in a place that kind of suits my personality and allows me to grow. Like, it's not sacrificing too much on the professional front, but it's giving me a lot on the personal side of it. Because
Yeah.
in the end, mental health is also really important, right?
And that's why when we started this conversation, my first question to you was like, what's the goal and what's important to you? Because I get a lot of questions on the channel, people saying like, what's the best uni between this one and that one? And
Yeah.
I don't have the time to always ask the same question. The first question is always, well, what's your goal? What are you hoping for? Because for some people, it's all about migration. Okay, great,
Yeah.
that's good. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. But for other people,
Yeah.
it's like, well, I have different goals and so that's important. You know,
Yeah.
for some people, I would say like you need to go to a small regional university because
Yeah.
that's what's going to give you the best experience for what you're hoping to achieve. So I think your attitude is fantastic. What I was just in the process of looking up, what I did was I'm just pulling up this Home Affairs, Immigration and Citizenship stuff, the skilled
Yeah.
migration program. And somewhere on here you'll find the skilled occupation list,
Skills
right?
occupationalist. Yeah.
Yeah, so you've probably seen this. This is where people can come to find what's on the actual list. Surely UX is on here. We don't have enough user experience designers. There's no way.
I think what they have is there are certain programs that they encourage students to take up.
Yeah.
So there was a program which was adjacent to what I was going for
Yep.
in the University of Sydney. It had an external extension for an year. If you'd like do that program, you'll get an extension. So it was something like that.
User experience, in my opinion, is only going to become more important when you think
Yeah,
with generative AI. There's just going to be so much shit content. The whole internet is going to be full of shit machine
true.
generated content. Like, what's going to be the currency of the internet? It's going to be quality
Yeah,
experience, a quality user experience. It's going to be
makes
everything.
sense. What's that big question that you constantly have to answer to these students, like when they're deciding their universities or whenever they're considering moving abroad for their studies?
Trying to decide between different options, between different universities, and how do I compare two universities? And so that website I showed you, compared.edu.au, is a great resource for that. Don't spend enough time thinking that through. They you know, their parents are putting pressure on them to do something, and that's a real thing. Like that's really
Yeah,
hard. But being able to like think clear-headedly about what you actually want, and then do the research to find out which one best aligns with that is
yeah,
hard. And I think people are sometimes looking just for an easy answer. Like, you could have gotten on this call and said, I need help to choose between this uni and that uni. But you
yeah,
didn't. You've asked very different questions. And that's why I've really enjoyed this conversation. It's better to do what you're doing, to really think about your whole life and
yeah,
all of the things that you enjoy and everything you want to achieve. And then not putting pressure on yourself to try and get it right first time, because you could get it wrong. Okay, that's
yeah.
life. We all make mistakes. So
It's really difficult when I think about it that I'm really comfortable out here in my country, in my parents' home. I'm 23. I haven't lived out a day outside of my home for like studies, and but then I have to do it for my own character development and my own personality, and all of these different experiences will define me as to
mhm.
who I am as a person. What I can do is that I can accumulate as much information as I can, and then let's see where it goes from there.
Yeah.
That's the least that I can do
Well, I'll
from
be very
the
honest,
part.
Manish, and this is not just exclusive to you. This is for
Yeah,
everybody. It will be hard. It is hard for every single human that goes and studies overseas. I had,
yeah,
yeah, it was hard for me in some ways. It was hard for my wife when she came to Australia and studied
yeah,
here. It's hard for everyone in some way. It's not the absence of difficulty that makes it rewarding. It's the fact that there was difficulty and you can get through it. That's where
yeah,
the real reward is. So knowing that, yeah, there are going to be a lot of challenges for anyone that
yeah,
comes to study in Australia, in America, in the UK, whatever. is just the reality of it. I really appreciate you've got a really great attitude, and that will serve you really well if you come to Australia. For sure, you'll get through it.
Thank you so much. It means a lot.
Yeah, it's been a great conversation. I've really appreciated it.
Well,
Good.
thank you so much for your time.